All right, everybody. It is Tara Boothby, Sojourn Psychology, and this is our second episode of Conversations for Restoration with my dear friend Tim Wilbur, Bishop Tim Wilbur. Yeah, Tim, I'm so excited to have you here.
Well, I'm delighted to be a part of this. Thanks for inviting me. Um,
Yes,
I always love visiting with you and
I always, yeah,
spending time together. It's always fun.
yeah,
Always lifts my soul. So this is a good day for me.
yeah. And so, Tim, maybe just give us a little bit of geographical information. Where are you?
We live in north central Washington in a city called Wenatchee. We're on the east side of the Cascades, so we're on the dry side of Washington State. A lot of people think about Washington as the evergreen state. That's the motto, but it's not green over here. It's we're in the desert, and we are about 100 miles from the Canadian border, and we've lived up this direction for almost 40 years.
Wow.
Was not originally from the Northwest.
Right. Where were you from again? I was trying to
Uh,
remember.
I was raised in Kansas City
Right,
in
right.
the Bible Belt,
Bible
and
Belt.
yeah, very hyper fundamental Baptist family. And of course, I became a Baptist preacher, Baptist pastor uh, as an adult. And that was the beginnings of my ministry days.
Yes. So then and part of like Tim and I are prepared to talk about like some of the shifts in understanding who God is and how discovering that God is actually loving benefits us and improves us as humans. But curiosity, so you were born and raised Baptist and then became
Right.
a pastor. How old were you when you became a pastor?
Well, I was mid 20s when I sensed that God was calling me to be a pastor. I had for many years aspired to be a professional baseball player and had a lot of people pushing me that direction. And then I had always been in church ever since the day I was born, really. I think I was born on a Wednesday and was in church the following Sunday. My folks were very devoted churchgoers. My dad, not so much a, a follower of Jesus. My parents divorced when I was a teenager. But anyway, uh, my wife and I were very involved in the church and involved with the youth, and I just sensed a calling to do more than just be a volunteer. And so I became a pastor, went to Bible college, became a pastor in my mid 20s.
Wow. And because I know where you met your wife, but everybody who has a privilege of meeting you, Tim, they get to hear these stories about Shirley. So maybe you can just
Right.
share a bit about where did you meet this woman actually?
Well, we were toddlers together in the same church. We have grown up together. Our families were friends. We grew up in the same church, and so I've she is the other than my own family, the one person I have known literally all of my life.
Yeah.
And so we dated in high school. I played football, and she was a cheerleader. And then as soon as she graduated from high school, we were both teenagers when she graduated from high school. Then we got married and started our family.
Yeah. So you got married basically high school, well, forever sweethearts, married
Yeah,
right out of high school pretty much. And
right.
then and were married. Did you have children too when you went to Bible school?
Oh yeah, we had two children. We have
Wow.
three, but our two oldest. One was born right after I started Bible college, and
Wow.
yeah, I don't recommend going about it that way.
No.
That's not the preferred route to go, but that's
Yes.
just how it worked with us. And I worked for a man who was a dear, dear man. He was a Catholic, but he loved our family, and so I was a glass cutter, a glazer at the time, and he allowed me to go to Bible college in the mornings and then work full time after Bible college, after my classes were
Wow.
over, and was very generous with us. And so I was able to continue working full time at the job at the glass company. But
Wow.
Shirley, my goodness,
She's a saint.
she's a
That
saint.
woman is
Yeah,
a saint.
we have statues of her here in the house. We light candles to her, and yeah, and
I can see why.
oh, yeah, very amazing woman. She's a behavioral health therapist.
Right.
Does work very much like you do, and has quite a large patient load
Good for her.
these days here. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. So then is and you pastored, like, I mean, you're not very old, so like 5, 10 years since you're 20
yeah,
mid-20s.
yeah. I pastored for 45 years.
Wow, right?
Yeah,
And you don't anymore.
I don't anymore. No, I I retired a little over a year ago, 13 months ago, not because I wanted to,
Right.
but I was asked, I was forced to retire by
Yeah.
the church that I started 35 years ago. Pretty painful time
Yeah.
for our family, but in some ways, in a very big way, it was a big turning point for me
Right.
because at the same time, my my children did an intervention with me, and because of my drinking,
Yeah.
and so at that when I was forced out of the church, then I went right into rehab and spent 6 weeks in a rehab facility, and I've been sober now for, let's see, I can tell you how many days because it's on my phone. I have been sober now for 394 days.
It's amazing.
Yeah, so it was kind of in one way, it was the one of the hardest periods for me, but in another way, it was a wake up call about, um, certainly about my drinking, which was something I had done privately for a very, well, not really privately. I mean, you were aware of my drinking as well, and so, but it I took that seriously and got
Yes.
help.
Yeah. And then, I mean, so, and thank you for sharing. I know I love your sincerity, Tim. And we've known each other for since 2022.
Mhm.
We met down at Sun River at a theology, I call it like summer camp for grown-ups, like one of our
Right.
nerd retreats. A bunch of us nerds get together and talk
Yeah,
about
that's true.
theology. But like we were fast friends, and we
Yeah.
just were like the level of authenticity. So with you being forced out of your church, like how far away is your church from your home? Like where?
10 minutes.
Yeah, that's so
Yeah.
it that to me, that's there's such grief in that. Like this is a church you started. You were there for
Mhm.
like 45 years?
30, I was at this church 35 years.
35 years.
Yeah.
35 years. That's a lifetime. That's a marriage. 35 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just heartbreaking, lots of grief.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was, I didn't realize how my life was just very tangled up with it,
Mm,
how that had become so much of my life and my identity. Um, not after I was not the pastor there, I didn't know who I was,
yeah.
because I had just been, that's who, that's what I had done for so long that it was a very unhealthy very unhealthy relationship, which is why now I do have a desire to be available for pastors who just need a friend, someone who'll listen to them. I didn't have anyone to go to,
Yeah.
that I felt was a safe person. And I have friends here in town, and they are wonderful friends of mine, but I I didn't feel like that was a safe place I could go because of their connections with organizations
Yeah.
that I serve with. And so, who do you tell? Who
Yes.
it, it it's I was very isolated, and that was not healthy for me either.
And now you know, and I think it's an important story. This is an important story for, and I hope people who listen understand that a lot of sharing these stories is just for all of our own healing as we start to understand more of what is in love's kind. So here you are,
Yeah,
Tevin, like you are, I know you in this space of like we love, we know that God is loving, that God is
yeah,
inclusive, God is, and the affirmingness and all these things that you can talk about. But
right.
even still, your wake up call with all you knew, there's still this humanness that you were isolating or hiding.
Oh yeah, definitely. In my fundamental Baptist days, I, we talked we talked about love. God so loved the world was one of the first Bible verses I ever memorized. But we viewed God as very disapproving,
Mm-hmm.
and that is a groove that runs very deep in your soul. And even though theologically you can you can morph into a better understanding of God's love, and that God is on your side and God is not disapproving, you still I still wrestled with
Yeah.
that that um yes, God is love, but you better not cross him. You know,
Yeah.
you better, because my dad and mom, they were love too. But man, my mom was just she was a short lady, but my brother and I were scared to death of her. We would not, we would talk about her behind her back, but boy, some of the things that we would say to each other, we would never say to her, because um, she wouldn't hit us or anything, but she could definitely make our lives
Oh
a,
yeah.
a living hell. And so, even though in my coming to understand God is more accepting and more loving, there was still that deep sense of disapproval, um,
Yeah.
of if I didn't do things exactly right, if I didn't live up to my own expectations, I think um,
Mm-hmm.
was a big part of it. And that's where we one of our good friends is Kenneth Tanner,
Mm-hmm.
and I just love his the help he's given to me, just talking about the humanness of Jesus,
Yes.
and the what we learn at Open Table about our own humanity, that that our humanness is very special.
Yes.
It's not our perfection that causes God to delight in us. It, it's I'm coming to learn that it is our vulnerability which leads us to greater empathy and greater love for the vulnerable, um, and greater understanding of those who struggle.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's one of the reasons why I uh, I I have I have such a connection with the people in our community who do struggle. I work with the
Hmm.
LGBTQIA community, and I work with grief families uh, who are grieving. I have led survivors of suicide grief
Mm,
groups, and I connect have for some reason there is just a connection with them, and perhaps that's the reason why is because I have a deep sense of my own humanity.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
I get what it means to hurt and to feel helpless and uh, to know that there isn't anything, humanly speaking, that can be done other than to be present.
right, right.
And, and sometimes that's all God asks. Just
Well,
be
be
there.
just be, and what if we actually were just present, you know? So I was thinking about this actually this morning when I was driving. And I love Father Kenneth, and like, I mean, again, there's so many beautiful, compassionate people around us. And when I think of you, Tim, being with people and they're very painful places in the grief
Mhm.
group and the LGBTQ, these marginalized places. And I'm like, of course, you would be such an asset and an ally because you are so compassionate. You embody this compassion. But I was thinking about the human God thing as well, that uh, this the story of Jesus, and people can have their own theology about Jesus, whether whatever, believe what you believe, but that humanness, and Jesus is the human God. And then I was thinking about it because that blows my mind
Mhm.
to think of that
Yeah.
meaning of our humanness and the value, like you said. And then I thought, and God is humane. There's this humane,
Yeah.
like, what if we believe in a grander supernatural love that is humane? And
Yeah.
that word for me, it was just this shattering of the, like you said, the God that we're raised with, this dangerous entity that can scold us
Mhm.
or hit us or whatever, or fire us.
Right. Right. Yeah. That is a very beautiful word.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a word that I didn't hear. I didn't hear that much growing up. God's love, even in John 3:16, was more like the casino kind of love, where you might hit the jackpot. God loved the world as long as the world accepted Jesus as their savior.
Yes.
And then the condition beyond that was God loves the believer as long as certain conditions are met. And so it's
Mm,
it's always okay, God loves, and that's a broad statement, but God really loves those who achieve a certain holiness or level of
yeah.
sanctification, and but humane. I think of a humane society for animals. I
Yeah.
mean, they receive the unwanted. They receive the ones, sometimes the animals at their very worst, and they love them.
Yeah.
They care for them, and a humane God, our God, that is our God. That's how He receives us. And I say this at funerals, and it's starting to actually, I'm starting actually to have it. My own soul is starting to absorb it. That God moves in closely to the brokenhearted,
Mm-hmm.
and so in reality, when I'm brokenhearted, maybe those are the times I am experiencing the deepest level of love from God, rather than when I hit the jackpot.
Yes. Yeah.
And so I mean, it's not like I strive to be brokenhearted. Oh God, God
No,
help
don't
me.
do that.
God
Don't
help
do
me.
that.
No, but to quit striving to hit the jackpot, and which is what I did for nearly 45 years of ministry, was always wanting to hit that place where God would go, ah, you made it.
Yeah.
And I yet when I have been now at my lowest for the past 13 months, the deepest sense of God's favor.
Yeah.
And I honestly, my AA friends have been very helpful. My Alcoholics Anonymous friends have been very helpful to me,
Yeah.
because, there it's their thing is the only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. And this humane God, uh, his help, the only requirement for his help is that you are hurting,
Yeah.
or the only requirement for salvation is that you are a sinner.
But
Well,
we're all people. And
here we
I mean,
go.
yeah, I like when we're talking about the humaneness and you bring up the Humane Society. And I think it's that fear, what I write about is that we're flawed and fabulous, like our flawedness. It feels
Mhm.
animalistic. I know my animalistic nature and
Yeah.
how we try to hide it. And I feel like you and I hide it less. Like I feel like you were hiding less and less of your flaws, and yet you can still, in this place of healing, say, wow, I was hiding so much. Nobody knew. I was in my own way. I was in my own way.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that the animalness is, I, for me, I look at it as my default.
Mm.
Without God's grace, my default. It's like we were texting back and forth the other night when talking about getting together for this. I have to choose the right thing.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I will just by default go the wrong direction, and
Yeah.
without even thinking I'm choosing that, it just is. It seems to just be the animalistic nature to go the wrong direction. And
And to look like we're going the right direction. And this is some of the spiritual abuse that so many people are trying to grapple with, and what these conversations of the restorative nature is like. Here's Tim and I honoring that we're going the wrong direction, but we can look like we're doing it the right way. And there's a lot of people in this sort of Christian, North American Christian realm
right,
that pretend and don't know that they're going the wrong direction.
right, and then get very animated if someone should bring up that I think you're going the wrong direction with that, because in their own thinking, and I understand it. I definitely have walked that pathway, that they
Yeah.
get very upset at how dare you. This is uh, I've we've always done it this way, which is the seven last words of the church. We never did it that way before.
Yeah.
And we're experiencing it here in our country right now with,
Oh yeah.
Bishop Buddy's words to our president. So many are just so angry with her for her prayer,
Yeah.
for her request, and these are the words of Jesus, but in their own minds, these are it's a their agenda has always been uh, so
Yeah.
politicized that it's difficult for them to hear those humane words and believe that it's the gospel.
And it is, and I'm glad you brought it up. I ordered Marianne Budd's book. I'm
Oh,
excited to read it. It's
mhm.
supposedly, I don't know how I got it because it's supposedly like sold out everywhere. But I was so in love with Marianne and what she said. And it was so Jesus-y to me. And it was right on. I'm like, beautiful. And her nonviolent protests, I watched her and I knew I could not have done it the way she did. She was emotionally engaged with herself. She kept her
Mhm.
footing. And she said this beautiful, bid for mercy.
Yes.
And so I was so in love, and I shared it in this page, which is quite fun Christian page where everybody's a little weird. It's the weird nerdy people, my people, I thought. And I got chewed up hard. And somebody that
Yeah.
I don't know wrote to me, "You need to take the plank out of your own eye." And I was like, I was pissed. And I didn't have time to like go in and try to be nonviolent and try to protest and care for what was said to
Yeah.
me and care for this person that I was hurting actually because of where they're at. So I just
Yeah.
deleted the post. But I thought I have many planks in my eyes. But admiring Marianne Budd is not one of them.
Not one of
That
them at
was
all.
not the plank, baby. That's not my
No,
plank.
not at all. But I've been on that bus.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
as in my former years as a pastor, I can see myself before my deconstruction and reconstruction. I can see myself believing the same things about
Yeah.
Bishop Buddy and about um, that those words, not understanding that those are the implications for our current society.
Yeah. And we
Um,
were we were raised like our tradition. So even like I love my LGBTQ plus friends and clients, but I was raised in a tradition that taught me it was okay to, and that I'm not supposed to hate anybody, but I could believe that those people are not included. I love my
oh,
Muslim friends. I love my Sikh friends. I love my Catholic friends. But I was
right.
raised to believe, even the Catholics, was
Yeah,
raised to believe they were not included. That's
me too.
lunacy to me.
Me too.
Yeah.
I can remember growing up, my brother, who uh, he passed away several years ago, but he was, I think, 3 years older than me, 3 grades older than me. He came home so excited from grade school one day because he had made a new friend who was a Christian. So excited. We didn't live very close to our church. And so we didn't go to school with any of the kids in our church. So he was so excited. And my, I remember we were at the dinner table and I think it was my mother asked what church he went to. And we were Baptists and he went to a Nazarene church.
Oh,
And there was a big question as to whether or not he was truly a Christian. And my brother was devastated.
oh
I
yeah.
thought he said he was a Christian though, and that was just our thinking. That was God's love. That was the God's love I was raised on. From the time I was a very small boy, God's love for you is immense when you um, fulfill all of these, when you check all of these boxes. And
Yeah.
he loves you. He loves you. Okay, you know, if you go to the Nazarene church, but he really loves you if you go to the Baptist church. You're really
Oh,
a Christian if you go to, it's like, and then there were Southern Baptists who weren't our flavor, and even they weren't, really in God's favor. And so that I began to deconstruct. I was a Baptist pastor for the first 4 years, and then I became non-denominational. So my deconstruction really began about 40 years ago.
wow.
Um, as far as moving away from the harsh, exclusive God, it was incremental.
Yes.
It wasn't, it wasn't as broad as it is now. But um, I used to say years ago that I'm a recovering fundamentalist
Yeah.
because I drank the Kool-Aid. I went to a fundamental Baptist Bible college, very much like a Jerry Falwell type of school, and I was one of those people. I would have probably voted for Donald Trump and would have I would have gone right along with everything that he's doing right now. And so I understand where they're coming from.
Yeah.
It is an indoctrination. It truly is.
It is. And I have empathy for our people too, and that like with politics, we talk about it a bit different up in Canada, but I was just raised that you vote for conservatives, which
Yeah.
is like Trump.
Mhm.
But I wasn't taught to read about politics. I wasn't raised, I still don't know policy and all these things. It was just like that's who you just vote. This is the
Right.
only choice that you vote for. And it's heartbreaking that that drinking the Kool-Aid or sitting at the Jesus slot machine, it's the fictitious, we don't really believe this. I'm just going to say
Right.
we're just joking about the slot machine,
Right.
but we're
Because we
not
don't
paying.
gamble either.
We don't gamble either much. But that there's this lottery system. You just sit at the machine and put the one day you're going to put the right quarter in there, and you're going to pull, and
Yeah.
you're going to have this big jackpot. But you just sit there and keep putting your coins in the way that a good person does. and
Yes.
and this is an exclusive casino. This is like the one in, where is that, Casino Royale.
Yeah.
This is the James Bond casino, baby.
Yes.
And not everybody's there. The
Right. Only the
and
Baptists and the
Yeah,
ones who go to the right church are even at that casino.
we wouldn't have been allowed to be friends even back
We
in the
wouldn't
day.
have. I'm so glad I'm not there now because I would never have been friends with you.
I know.
And look
Yeah.
at what we would have missed.
Well, yeah.
And
Yeah.
I look back on those days. I don't regret being raised at Olivet Baptist Church in Kansas City, Kansas. Um, I learned so much, and I was loved and nurtured by very good people. Um, and some of the guys I hung out with, they still are there, and I'm Facebook friends with them, and they don't get me. What happened to you? Where did you fall off the wagon and all of that? But they are very good people.
Very good people.
They love God,
Yeah.
the God of their understanding, as we say in AA,
Yes. The God of their
the
understanding.
God of their understanding.
I've been using that since I heard you say that when we were
Yeah,
speaking last week. But too, it is like there's good people and we're all included. And so I think that part of it is like we love our people, we love the people of our tradition. And I love myself back there in those stories. I still see her. She knew things she didn't know that she knew.
right,
And when you say, "Oh, I started deconstructing 40 years ago," I believe you. And I think that part of it for all of us is like hopefully we're always all deconstructing, whether people honor
right,
that they are or not. We are. This is mental
right.
wellness. This is how we gain more mental wellness. Um, but that I think too, and I'm curious about how you would notice this. Like sometimes when I think of my old tradition, I think of the church as grandma's house, like the actual physical building. And I loved being a child in the church. I loved crawling under the pews, and I loved running around in the back hallways and going to
Right,
Bible study and Sunday school, and
right.
working in the nursery and all. I loved it. It was grandma's house.
Yeah,
And it was so sad when I exited my old tradition, when I was like, I can't go here anymore.
yeah,
And the grief of what seemed magical about being raised in the church. And then for you, I wonder
right.
like how you, because you've had a few of those losses of grandma's house.
Yeah. We still go back. We'll return to Kansas City this coming weekend. Shirley's father is still living, and it will be his 97th birthday. And
Wow.
whenever yeah, he sadly has dementia.
Wow.
But his a lot of his grandchildren, my youngest will fly in. He lives with us, but he will be working in Connecticut. We'll fly from Connecticut back to Kansas City for the birthday. A lot of the grandkids will be there to help Grandpa celebrate, which will be a special day. But whenever we're back in Kansas City, we do go to Grandma's house. We go back to Olivet Baptist Church. They have a new pastor now. I haven't met him, but they've always treated us very kindly. They know that we have, they don't call it deconstruction. They probably call it heresy.
Or
They know
backsliding.
we're different, but they always treat us kindly. And the former pastor, always had me pray at the end of the
Oh,
service. And but yeah, that's for me, that's a special place. I have gone only twice back to the church I started. One was before I realized that they were not going to have me back
yeah.
ever, um, which was quite a blow. When I found out they were um, that the plan all along was for me not to return, um, that they had conspired, the leadership had conspired to, anyway. So I went there once, and then some people said, well, we should at least do a retirement
Yeah.
little thing for him. So I went to that. So, but I was so emotionally um discombobulated. Do you
That's
guys use that word?
that makes sense. I was thinking,
Discombobulated. I couldn't,
yep.
it was like going to a funeral of maybe your best friend, or I was just so inundated with grief and
Yeah.
anger and regret
Yeah.
and self-loathing that I had, how could I have been so stupid,
Yeah.
not only to have lost the church, but so stupid to have invested 35 years of my life and end up with it, a small gathering of people who said a few kind words, and after a service that I wasn't even invited to. So
Yeah.
yeah, so returning to that it was like I didn't even know the place.
No.
Um,
And there's a few things here, but and looking for the good intention in those that have hurt us terribly. And in some ways I applaud them for trying to do a retirement thing for you. I know I have so many pastors I've sat with, and they're just, don't let the door hit you on the way out. There's no closure, there's no retirement, there's no
right.
nothing. So that's one thing, but also, the anguish of you actually going, and like how
Yeah.
painful for you. But the
Yeah.
that discombobulated and the tones of anger, that's the risk when we start to process through the spiritual abuse, the institutional trauma, is that anger. And like how do we honor it and heal it?
Yeah. Yeah. As I was going to a therapist at the time who was she's like my wife. She's also a pastor's wife. And she said, I want you to write down, it was the day after, 2 days after, I want you to write down journal some of your feelings. And I'm going to give you about 15 minutes. And she said, and I'm going to tell you that if you don't write down a few bad words, I'm just going to call bullshit on
There should be some swears in there,
it.
okay?
Exactly. There should be some swearing in that. And I mean, she was right. I had so much anger. The leaders did not want me to come back, but there were people in the congregation. There were my people. I mean,
Yeah.
they'd come to Christ under our ministry. And so the leaders were like, well, if we don't do this retirement thing for Tim, we're going to lose these people. So they didn't say any, the leaders didn't say anything at this testimonial time. They didn't want it. They didn't even talk to me. But this group of people, this small group of people did. And so, yeah, so I did write a few bad words.
Good.
And so my therapist thought, okay, good, this is all right. But she did think I was still blowing smoke that
Well,
I did.
you're very kind-hearted though, is the other thing is that you are loving and it's I don't think you're spiteful. I'm sure you must have touched some of those things, but as well, it's so relatable when we talk about these stories and like to hear the story of how angry these people are or were with you and how many people have had those stories. And that's
Mhm.
why there's so many people trying to heal from institutional trauma. I'm angry with you because you have a friend who is gay. Why are you mad at me for having a
Right,
friend? Like, why
right.
is this a church issue and now you're angry at me?
Yeah,
And so
it's
there's this,
irrational.
it's irrational. And then for you, the anger towards you or what, I don't know, it's so sad. And yet it's true. This is what people are enduring right now.
It is. I think that it's an emotion that they have to. I think what they had hoped in my situation is that when um, I was going to retire, but I didn't realize that in their minds, retirement meant that I was never going to have a role at the church ever again.
Yeah.
And that's what they wanted. They because the young pastor replacing me has a lot of insecurities and just wanted to have it just a clean slate to run the church. And I think that if I had just said, "Oh, okay," but I wasn't at a place where I could just say, "Well, okay." So I pushed back on that. And so I think what happened was the way that Pastor, the replacement, I handpicked her. She's a beautiful, wonderful person, but I think
Yeah.
for it to be okay with her, she had to be angry rather than. I think she felt grief about it to begin with,
Yeah.
and like, oh, I've hurt. I think at first it was like, oh, I've hurt Tim. I didn't want to hurt Tim, but she knew what she wanted. And so for it to be okay with her, she had to turn that feeling hurt into anger toward me. Why didn't he just go away? If he would have just gone away, then
Yeah.
then it wouldn't have had to come to this. And that was the narrative then that she began to tell my friends. Listen, it didn't have to be this way. If he would have just gone away, then we wouldn't have had to kick him out.
Or to feel like it's okay to actually say, like, I had a dear colleague that we love each other, and I knew I had to be clear with my boundary, because
Mm-hmm.
if I didn't say this, I need a boundary with you here, I could see that our friendship was going to be ruined. And
Right.
somehow I gave myself permission to say, I need this boundary. And it saved our relationship. But so few people, like this pastor, she could have said, Tim, you can't come to the church. You're going to have to find a new church body. It's just not going to work. She could have said it in truth and kindness and love,
Mm-hmm.
rather than feeling this sense of like exiling, like, that because it's okay
Yeah.
to have boundaries. It's okay to say, you know,
It's okay to say this is how I want it to be.
yeah,
Um, and I wasn't asking even for a salary. I was,
you're maybe asking for a pew. Like, could I
yeah,
sit? Can I
that's
sit
all.
my
Yeah,
butt
that
down
was
and
it.
Yeah.
and the other part that's hurtful is that she hasn't spoken to me. I have
Yeah.
reached out to her, and her response back is, I have asked you to stop texting me.
Wow.
And so there is absolutely no closure
Yeah. And it's,
on any of it. And so
yeah.
um I one of her concerns, the concerns of the leadership, is that they were afraid I would go around town and badmouth the church.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not going to do that. I mean,
Well,
why?
and you wouldn't. And even when you're
I,
talking about your pain here, the intention is not a bad mouthing. It's the unfathomableness of when we touch trauma and it doesn't make sense. And it doesn't have to be this way, you know.
right.
But for you, it's just this really sad thing. And I will say it's all being out of relationship is always unnatural. Like you
Mm-hmm.
said, you don't get closure, and it's just really sad.
It's very sad.
Plus, I think you could do it a different way. Like if it's like meet me in the mess and let's do this a different way.
Yeah.
But
And
yeah,
and um, there was a person who wanted to mediate a meeting between the two of us, and I was happy to go that route. And um, he said, "Well, uh, just so everyone knows what's on the table, write down what you hope to accomplish ahead of time, and so that no one gets blindsided."
yeah,
I said, "That's a great idea. I would love to do that." So I wrote I just want Pastor Kelsey to know that I want her forgiveness,
yeah,
because yeah, when I was hurt when she didn't want me even to be at the church at all, I was hurt by that. And so yeah, I didn't respond as well as I could.
yeah,
And but her responses were much different. And so when the mediator read our two responses, he said, "No, you guys aren't ready for a mediation." And so it just got dropped, and we haven't had the opportunity to do
yeah,
to do any of that work. And I just think it's very sad that it this is how it ends. I mean, I'm not going to lie to people when people say, "How are you? Hey, you're retired. How are you doing with retirement?" I'm not going to lie to them. I am a horrible retiree. I,
you're too young. You're too
I,
young.
well, I'm 70. I'll be 70 next month. I mean, I guess I'm the age of retirement, but I don't feel like I should be retired because I I'm a pastor.
Yeah,
I just I don't believe it's like some mystical calling. I can't not be a pastor, but I in my heart of hearts I'm a pastor, and I'm not pastoring right now, and I feel a void.
yeah.
Um,
But
and
there's you and I've talked to, and this is where um I'll make sure I put your contact information below so that if people
yes,
want to, and your email is fine, just put
yeah,
your
oh
email,
yes, of course,
because I know that you're sort of leaning into this place. You have a new Facebook page where you're like wanting to, be there for pastors.
right.
And you still have such ministry. You do the leadership work out in India, and then you've got the recovery center down. And is it in Mexico? Is it in
Uh-huh.
California?
Baja California.
Baja
Mexico,
California.
that is Mexico, yes.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
the leadership things that you'll be doing down there.
Mm-hmm.
But I think too, it's like the transparency over your hurt is helpful. And that's why I want to share these stories with people, that somebody can hear how Tim was hurt by the church and not feel so alone with whatever version. Because it's not just this like, single mother who was never accepted in the church congregation. There's pastors who have been very hurt. There's all sorts of people who have been very hurt.
Mm-hmm.
Um, And sometimes it's so deeply personal, like your story is so deeply personal. I think of one of the worst things that happened to me was at the end of my undergrad in theology, like 2 weeks before graduation. I pissed off this stupid professor. He didn't like me. We played intramural hockey. I know why he didn't like me. I know I was terrible at hockey. I'm not saying I was good at it, but he I wrote a paper on Brother Lawrence, and the thesis statement was all of life is worship. And I love the mystics. And
Yeah.
he wrote on there, these ideas are heretical. I don't know how I did it, but I went to him, I was like, hey,
What?
I'm kind of upset. Like, I'm graduating with a degree in theology, and you're saying this is heretical. You called me a heretic. He said, I didn't call you a heretic. I said, your ideas are heretical. I'm like, those are my ideas. And I'm about to
Yeah.
walk across the stage with a degree in theology, and you should have a problem with that. I don't know how I did it, but that's what I
Good
said.
for you. Good for
It,
you.
but that pain of like, to me, I just have a big, like, what a fucking loser attitude to that whole
Yeah.
scenario of some man
Yeah.
trying to have power over me, but really
Yeah.
didn't have any legs beneath it. But it's
Right.
less personal. It's had a lot of abuse impact on me ever
Hmm.
since that person said that to me.
Sure.
However, I had no relationship, and I always kind of thought he was a stupid idiot anyhow, which is fine. I'm like, whatever, your opinion. It got tattooed on my heart, but
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't like the source that it came from. When
No.
the pain is tattooed on your heart from somebody that you loved or you mentored or you admired, and there
Yeah.
was emotional safety and health, and then this person is like, you're gone. I'll never
Yeah.
talk to you again.
Yeah. And I'm erased. No, there's no. I went to a meeting. Oh, in March of 2024. I got out of rehab in February, and then I went to a meeting as interfaith justice meeting that just happened to gather at New Song, the church that I pastored. And so I thought about it. And I said, well, I'm a part of this. I've been invited by this interfaith justice group. I'm going to go to the meeting. And so I went there, and the pastor of that church, Pastor Kelsey, uh, gave a little history of the church. No mention of me, which is fine. But that it had started, 35 years ago, and talked a little bit about, but mostly talked about what she did now, and didn't realize I was sitting in amongst the group, and then sat down. And about 10 minutes later, she looked over and saw that I was there, and she stopped everything and said, oh, 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 I didn't realize. Uh, Tim Wilbur's here. Tim started New Song. And I just didn't know he was here. And it's like, Kelsey,
It's just uncomfortable.
just so uncomfortable. And it, yeah, it just felt, it was very awkward. And it felt like it, that she had deliberately excluded my name from all of that. And then she was backtracking, trying to make
Yeah.
up for it all. And that, but that is her goal. To just there's nothing about me anywhere, um, because of her insecurities. And she that's going to be her Achilles heel, I'm afraid, because
I
I know
think
what
it's,
it's
yeah.
like to be a pastor and to be insecure. I know exactly what that's like.
Yeah. And I think it's all too common when pastors are spiritually abused, and the institution traumatized pastors. You're forced out, or you're just retired out, and you are erased.
Yeah.
Like, it is, that eraser is so true. But then, even like, I think we all feel that way. Like, I'll lament with my dear colleague Tony, and we talk about like being so in a community,
Uh-huh.
and then you leave and nobody texts and says, where are you?
Yeah.
Nobody does it. And the eraser is so relatable, Tim. That's so
Yeah.
relatable.
Yeah, I know that that's very common. There are times that I'll go, does this thing even work? I guess my phone must not work because yeah, I'm not getting any calls or any texts from people who were once, we were once close, but now then,
Yeah. Now
yeah,
we're not. And it was interesting too. It's like, because our community, the open table conference community, and we are so bonded, and we are so in love with this community, and we're all scattered all over. But when you
mhm,
when you were going through what you were going through last winter, and it's not like you and I were talking all the time or anything, but all of a sudden I'm like, Tim was on my radar and I couldn't find you. And I even called you, right? Because I was like, where
right,
are you? And then you had to tell me, because I was just like, Tim's gone. Where's Tim?
right.
In my spirit was like, started harassing you until you told me where you were. Yeah.
Yeah, I was
But
happy about that. I'm glad that you did.
I'm glad that, and I
Yeah,
think this is part of the healing piece too, is I'm glad that I let myself be annoying. Like, I think of myself as a little sister a lot with all you big old theologians and
big
pastors.
old men.
Old men. Well, it shocks me you're 70. But I'm like, I was just so annoying until I found you. Um and
But
and
that's what
I
we need.
that's what we need. That's
Yeah,
part of, like, so when we're talking about like healing the pain and the discombobulated emotion, and some of it is like speaking speaking the truth of our story and our pain,
yeah,
and
yeah,
loving the other people as well, because they have their own pain story. So
yeah.
Kelsey's got her own pain story.
She does, and I know a lot of it. I
Yeah.
mean, we were associates for 4 years.
Yeah, and you loved you, and we love our people
Yeah,
even if they've erased us.
true.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
then part of the healing for you and I is to what's within love's kind is to be annoying. If somebody tells us to scram enough times,
yeah,
eventually we'll be like, okay, I'll find my other people to annoy. Somebody wants me to bug them.
yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, it. But hopefully, we can even see through that. Sometimes when someone tells us to scram, what they're really saying is, "Don't give up on me.
Don't give up on me.
Don't give up on me."
Yeah. Read, looking for the nuances and the tones.
Mhm.
Um, and not giving up, like, I think there's people I'm out of relationship with as well, and I haven't given up on those people, but I don't like me with them. and
Yeah,
and if I get to choose who I am in all my relationships, but if I can't like me in this relationship, then I have to fast from that and figure out, can
yeah,
I move back in? How do I move back in within love's kind? Like when I deleted that post, I think I could have done the loving thing with these strangers who were mad at me. But I didn't have time,
right.
and I had hurt them by sharing what I thought would be beautiful and an
Hmm.
opportunity for us to all rally in love. I hurt somebody. And I was like, well,
Right.
I'm sorry, I don't have time to like try and be in this with you.
Yeah. And that's uh that's one of the hardest places to try and be
Mhm.
in it with people is on a social media
Oh
post
yeah.
anyway.
It's like,
It,
and yet we have to. I mean, like,
we
it's
have to, right?
hard and it's
If you're going to be on it,
manufactured.
you're either in or out.
And we need to be on there. Like, we can't all
We do.
ditch the internet, because we need some love. We need love energy there, and
We
we
do.
need some healing voices
Yeah.
who are, caring to have these type of conversations. um
Yeah.
so I guess too, Tim, I'm just noticing, think about winding this conversation down. I guess what would you say, like when you think of the brokenhearted and the people who have been um, hurt by life and hurt by church life,
Hmm.
what do you want to? What do you say? What's your pastoral word?
My pastoral word. Part of part of my journey has been um, to remember some of the stories, historical stories um, from the Bible.
Mhm.
Joseph, who said to his brothers, "You meant it for evil, but God's intention is for good."
Mm.
That even people who had bad intentions in those things, um, it it isn't that God was saying, "I'm gonna, let's let bad things happen so that you'll grow," but that um, every day is an opportunity for God and me together to create something beautiful,
Mm.
regardless of what comes. God, um, He makes beauty out of ashes, according to Scripture. So I get handed something not from God, but something from another person, and so God, I say, God, what the hell do I do with this?
Yeah.
And I just sense God says, well, let's try to make something beautiful out of it. And Joseph's story is a beautiful story. How he has compassion on his brothers, and he goes and gets his father and takes care of his father. Where he could have said, go get dad and bring him here, and then the rest of you guys, I don't even care about you, but he didn't do
Yeah.
that. Very beautiful story of restoration. And I want to be a restorer.
Mm.
That's what's in my heart. Jesus says on the cross, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. Um, I'm inspired by our Black brothers and sisters, our
Mm.
African American brothers and sisters who did not turn their backs on the gospel,
Mhm.
on the church, but have created a better church
Mm.
whose roots are in the suffering, or the sacrificial co-suffering Jesus, not in the church of privilege,
Mm.
but in the church that cares about the poor and the suffering, because that's their experience. And so they inspire me, that my life, my ministry shouldn't be about privilege and about everything going well. That shouldn't
Yes.
be. uh, how often have I, as a pastor, prayed for God to bless people as if, they're there and they deserve some privilege from God? Well, it's not wrong to pray for blessing, but the expectation is we are a certain caste. That's my India ministry coming out of me. We're a special caste. We deserve something from God, rather than saying, God use these people to be a
Right.
blessing. That's how they'll be blessed. Use them to be a blessing. And so, my word for those who've been hurt by the church is, don't let that hurt make you like the people who hurt you.
Mm.
Don't make don't allow that hurt to cause you to become like them, but allow that hurt to to drive you deeper into that partnership with Jesus to create something beautiful.
Yeah.
Because that's what Jesus does. He takes the mess and he says, let's make something beautiful out of that.
Let's make something beautiful. And hurt can be a motivator, but healing is a more beautiful
A much
motivator.
more beautiful motivator. And I there are days when I get in the pit of hurt
Mhm.
and I just want to stay there. I just don't want anybody to pull me out. I'm here and I'm staying. So don't even try. But no, the healing is definitely much more beautiful than the hurt. And uh, my favorite translation of Ephesians 2:10 is the New Living Translation.
Mhm.
And it says, "You are God's masterpiece."
Mm,
And every day I remind myself of that verse because I'm a mess, but I'm God's masterpiece.
yes.
And he's not going to do something beautiful in my life. He has made me a masterpiece. He is doing beautiful shit in my life.
And you are beautiful, and that our identity is beauty.
Yeah,
Our identity is
yeah,
beauty. And so we should be confused by institutional trauma and by spiritual abuse, and it should feel unnatural. And and it's so good for us to normalize that pain is unnatural, the shunning, the exiling, the erasing, the magical Jesus slot machine. It's all unnatural.
right,
And the
right.
humaneness, the intention of a humane spirituality.
Yeah, yeah. None of it
Mhm.
should have ever happened. And Joseph, I don't think, was saying, yeah, this should have happened to me. None of it should have happened, but it did. And God was there, and God is here,
Mm.
and He can make something beautiful of it.
Yes.
He
Yeah.
can make something beautiful. And that's what I want my life to be. The old the old way, even my grandkids were noticing that I was not creating beauty. They were seeing
Mm.
something but this has been a wake up call for me.
Yeah.
And I continue to be, I was always woke, which is not a great word in some circles, but I'm becoming even woker
Yeah. Yeah.
because
And
yeah, it there are people who hurt much worse than me,
yes.
and I want to help. I want to be a source of healing for those folks.
Yes. Be awake and be alive in the life that we're given. Okay, Tim. Wowzers, wowzers, my friend. So I'm gonna say goodbye to this conversation and thank you so, so much for just you being you and showing up
Ah,
and yeah, your authenticity, your truth and sharing your story um with a compassionate lens for even those that have hurt you.
you're welcome. Thanks for allowing me
Oh,
to
of
do
course.
this. Love you so much, and I
Yes.
can't wait to talk again.
Love you too.
You have a great day.
Okay, bye.
Bye bye.